studios of EBN, I'm Rebecca Anderson. The headlines this hour. Spanish Prime Minister José María Aznar will be questioned in Parliament about links to anti-Basque death squads. The nuclear utility British Energy is set to announce job cuts and cost savings. And Britain's John Major condemns the IRA after it admitted Monday's bombing of the army headquarters in Northern Ireland. Spanish Prime Minister José María Aznar is being questioned in Parliament this afternoon about government links to anti-Basque death squads. Rumours abound that the former Prime Minister Felipe González led a campaign of terror against Basque guerrillas.
Mr. Aznar has repeatedly dodged questions about any knowledge of a link between his predecessor and terrorist tactics to put down a separatist movement in the Basque area of northern Spain. The issue has caused a split in Aznar's ruling Popular Party. The party's founder has said any anti-guerrilla actions undertaken by the government could not be considered terrorism, even if they were illegal. But Deputy Prime Minister Francisco Cascos has accused González of having waged war by hatching strategies with aides and friends. Mr. González has denied any role in the illegal fight against the Basque separatist group ETA. But the Spanish Supreme Court is still considering summoning the former Prime Minister and questioning him on a 4-year campaign of kidnappings, bombings, torture and murder.
Britain's nuclear generator British Energy is set to announce a rationalisation plan later today. The company is expected to reduce its workforce by 20% by the end of the century. That means a loss of about 1,300 jobs and savings of £100 million. British Energy proved to be one of the Conservative Party's most unpopular privatisations when it was sold off in July. Opposition politicians have criticised the job cuts and said the company is not performing as promised. But analysts say the cuts were largely outlined at the time of the privatisation. Well, Britain's Prime Minister John Major has described the IRA as sickening and hypocritical after it claimed responsibility for the double bombing of the army headquarters in Northern Ireland. Last night, the IRA told the Irish state broadcasters that it carried out Monday's attack, which wounded 31 people. It was the outlawed group's first bomb attack in the British-ruled province since the 1994 ceasefire. Security forces are now concerned that extreme nationalist groups may resume their campaign of violence in response. South Korea's Samsung Aerospace has tentatively agreed to take a 70% equity stake in the aircraft manufacturing activities of bankrupt Dutch company Fokker. That's for about $180 million. According to South Korean press reports, Samsung Aerospace is in last stage negotiations to finalise conditions, including funding, payment date and management conditions. However, Samsung say there has been no progress since the two sides exchanged a letter of intent last month. The European Union Farm Commissioner Franz Fischler is holding a press conference this morning on the latest research into BSE or mad cow disease. But it's unlikely to provide much comfort to the British government, which has been trying to reassure people that British beef is safe.
Angry farmers demonstrating outside the Conservative Party conference in Bournemouth. Many are demanding the resignation of British Agriculture Minister Douglas Hogg for his handling of the crisis, despite new promises of a multi-million-pound aid package. Inside, Mr Hogg drove his message home, saying he believed British beef was safe and calling for the EU to lift the ban. But, as he's admitted previously, that's not likely to happen soon. Franz Fischler's press conference today is expected to concentrate on areas that need further research, rather than providing any definite conclusions on how this crisis can be resolved. Jackie Crossley, EBN.
Japan's current account surplus shrank in August as the flow of foreign goods into the country continued to strengthen. The August surplus dropped by 28.9% to 460 billion yen or $4.14 billion from a year earlier. Economists say the fall comes as no surprise. Japan's current account surplus has been on the downward trend since September 1995, and August was the 21st month in a row that the merchandise trade surplus fell on a year-on-year basis. The South Korean government has announced a sweeping package of policies aimed at bolstering the competitiveness of Korean companies. The government has promised to cut some input costs for Korean corporations, freeze wages in state-managed companies, and allow firms to export more easily. The policy changes have been sparked by concern about the economy's recent slowdown. Growth of GDP is expected to slow to about 6.5% this year from 9% last year. However, some analysts say the measures will have little effect on the Korean economy in the short run. Israeli authorities are allowing 10,000 Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to enter the Jewish state for work today. The move eases a 2-week closure of the area. Israel shut the border last month when clashes broke out in the West Bank and Gaza over the opening of an entrance to a tunnel near a Muslim holy site. About 23,000 Palestinians worked in Israel before the closure. Well, according to the latest annual report from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, world arms sales rose by 15% last year. The rise to $30.2 billion was attributed to increased demand from the Middle East and East Asian markets. Despite the signs of recovery, the figures were the second lowest since 1987, when Cold War rivalry pushed the total sales up to $78.6 billion. Saudi Arabia was the single largest buyer of weapons, and the US accounted for $13.3 billion, or 44% of total sales. A memorial service for the 16 children and 1 teacher killed earlier this year in the Scottish village of Dunblane will be held this afternoon. The Prince of Wales is among those attending the service in the village cathedral. The tragedy sparked a debate on gun control in Britain, which is still being waged. The UK government is due to release next Monday a report on the massacre and private ownership of guns. Opinion polls show a majority of 70% of Britons supporting the banning of guns. Now, to help you get through the day, EBN's very own survival guide to the main economic and business bits on the calendar.
The UK Treasury publishes minutes of the September the 4th monetary meeting between the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Governor of the Bank of England today. UAP, the French insurance giant, releases its interim results. Analysts are expecting the company to post lower profits. EU Agriculture Commissioner Franz Fischler holds a press conference in Brussels. He will review the latest scientific evidence on the state of the mad cow crisis. The list of 1996 Nobel Prize winners grows. The prize for physics is due to be announced, followed shortly by the prize for chemistry.
Well, joining us now to discuss the US vice presidential debate is Bob Worcester, chairman of the polling company Mori. But before we start, I know you're here to discuss the US vice presidential debate, which will happen in the US shortly. Firstly, though, I know you poll on the royal family as much as you do on other things. What about this conned by a cunning fraudsters? The Sun's apology this morning to Princess Di and Hewitt on the pictures, the apparent video of them frolicking in the house. How do you think this is going to have affected the feeling about the royal family?
Well, everybody wins on this one except the Sun newspaper, who really have egg on their face in spades. The royal family looks good as a result of it because the press have clearly gone over the top. Journalists are about the least trusted people in the country in terms of professions, even less trusted than government ministers, and that's saying quite a lot. No television newsreaders actually are well up the veracity stakes. Yes, so it's the journalists who write the copy the newsreaders read that get it in the neck from the British public.
The European stock markets, sponsored by Merrill Lynch. The European stock markets, sponsored by Merrill Lynch.